Hi everyone, how's it going? My name's Tim Fung. I'm the co-founder and the CEO at Airtasker. Before I start, I'll just give you a little bit of background on myself. So I studied marketing at UNSW, went and worked for a Macquarie bank in investment banking for about 5 years. And during that time, I was watching a lot of the show Entourage, and I actually wanted to be like this guy, Ari Gold, on the right there. So I went and applied to work at a bunch of modeling agencies and celebrity agencies and stuff like that. And I was lucky to get picked up by a company called Chic Management, which discovered Miranda Kerr and supported a lot of rugby players and stuff like that. So I went out and worked pro bono there. And really fortunately, during that time, I bumped into the chairman of that business, a guy named Peter O'Connell. And Peter was one of the founding directors of Optus in Australia. And he had this idea one day, which was basically to do what Jetstar did to Qantas, to do the same thing to Telstra. So essentially a low-cost mobile SIM business. So we raised a bunch of money off a PowerPoint presentation. We're able to bring the 4 founders of a very similar business called Simyo in Europe, and we brought them to Australia, launched a company called AmazeSim, and about 5 years later, that business went and IPO'd and was quite successful. So I'm just losing my presentation, but essentially that was my MBA in doing startups. And in 2011, though. In 2011, I was moving apartments, and I actually asked one of my friends to help me move apartments. He runs a business that sells chicken chippies products, so they're like frozen refrigerated products. And I asked him to come and help me move because he had a truck. So for that weekend, he packed boxes for me, helped me clean, set up IKEA furniture, set up the Wi-Fi router, all of these kinds of things. And at the end of the weekend, I said to him, "Hey, thanks, man, that was awesome." Gave him a case of beer, and he shook his head. He was like, "That's the 4th time someone's asked me to help me move their apartment because everyone says, 'Hey, you got this truck, you can help me do all this stuff.'" And so what we realized is why do we ask our friends and family who are busy? This guy owns a business, very, very busy guy, but we ask them to help us with all these jobs. But there are all these people in Australia who want to be earning some extra money. And so what we realized is the reason for that is a lack of trust. We don't trust these people to come into our house and to touch all of our stuff. So, although we didn't look at it this way from the beginning, there's some very solid macroeconomics behind this. So, about 1.6 billion hours are spent each year doing all of these kind of everyday jobs that could easily be outsourced to another person. And businesses are growing their temporary workforces by about 8.8% year on year, which is far outstripping full-time growth. On the other side of the equation, in Australia, we have a relatively low unemployment rate. It sort of hovers around that 5.96% mark. But what they don't tell you, or they don't focus on, is this labour force underutilisation rate. So we have this huge number of people in Australia who have some work. They might be working anywhere from 8 to 20 hours a week, but they're looking for more work. And so there's this spread of about 9% of people who are looking for that extra income. So when you kind of combine these two sides of a marketplace directly together, the supply of labour and the demand for that labour, we're going to see about 250,000 jobs created in Australia over the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm probably the 3rd guy who's brought up this slide. But basically what we saw during Internet 1.0 is, we saw 3 huge marketplaces come out: real estate, car sales, and Seek. And they were really focused around your 3 largest assets that you have in life: your home, your car, and your job. And they were all kind of around product ownership, like transactional exchange of ownership. So if you look at something like realestate.com, it's about monetizing your home by giving it to somebody else. Or car sales, about selling your car to somebody else to monetize it. And thirdly, something like Seek is about getting a full-time job, mainly. But what we're seeing now is that with everything being so slick online, you've got all of your details online, you essentially have your social profile already uploaded through things like Facebook and LinkedIn, etc. We're seeing that everything can move from sort of this product ownership level down to a more incremental service benefits type relationship. So you're seeing that people are monetizing their homes now through things like Airbnb and stays. You're seeing that people are monetizing their cars now by driving on Uber or renting their car out via Car Next Door. And with their job, they're not necessarily going, "Hey, I've got to jump into this big section of full-time work." They're looking at being able to monetize their time on an incremental basis. And that's where we see there's a huge opportunity. We also believe, and we have a few international investors who've come into our business, and when we pitch them, we talk about Australia, and it is a low headcount country, but there are a couple of pieces that make Australia actually a really interesting place for building a marketplace. The first one is you have super high value customers. So if you look at something like Southeast Asia or even China, on average you have quite a low value customer. So yes, you have a huge headcount, you have a huge number of transactions, but pragmatically being able to extract revenue and gross margin out of that is limited. We have a high geographic density. So yes, if you look at the macroeconomics and say you have 25 million people and you have a country 400 times the size of Amsterdam, then there's going to be low density. But if you actually zoom in and look at that, really we have 2 main cities and 2 other quite large cities, but a vast proportion of the population is highly geographically dense. And that's really powerful for creating any marketplace that requires geographical proximity. And the third piece is we have a sustainable market. So when you have a look at those 2 first pieces, you look at the third piece, which is actually that what you want to be doing here is moving to a marketplace which has high penetration. So there's one thing to have a large number of transactions, a large number of people doing stuff, but actually what's also important is how closely connected those nodes of the network are. How quickly can you get to high penetration, to high density, because that's when you're going to be able to extract gross margin out of the business. So a very, very sustainable market, and you'll see, even though these businesses are mainly focused on the Australian market, they have very high market caps compared to some of the businesses that are in much larger headcount markets. So what actually is Airtasker? Airtasker is reimagining how labor is exchanged in the real world. We use the word reimagining because we're not just taking existing labor and trying to shove it into an app. We're not saying hey, here are all these people who are already doing something, let's go and give them another way of doing something. We're actually trying to define a new category of what labor is. So we're asking people, reimagine how you think about work. In the case of, say, a plumber, you have a toilet that's broken, you need it to be fixed. That person could be a plumber. They could also be your uncle up the road who knows how to fix your toilet and it just needs to tighten up a tap. So it's about reimagining how that labor is connected. So how does it work? It's super simple. You post a task using our iPhone app, Android app, or through our web application. And in about 10 minutes, you should receive about 3 to 5 offers from our workers. So these workers have profile information uploaded, everything from social connections through to police checks, working with children checks, trade licenses, are all stored on their profile. And that person will make you an offer. You can then, only you see those offers, so we're not trying to create a race to the bottom at all. We're replicating exactly what happens in real life. You see your 3 offers, you pick one of those workers to do the job. We then escrow your money. This makes a huge difference because now the worker can come to your place or buy those materials or do whatever he needs to do and knows that he's going to be paid or she's going to get paid at the end once that task is completed. Once the job is completed, you pay through the app, and you can leave a review. So we now have about 500,000 reviews on the platform, and what that does is closes the whole transaction loop, and it makes it much easier for the next guy when he comes along to choose who he's going to pick to do his job. He's going to be able to see all those reviews and get even stronger information signals. So how are people and businesses using Airtasker? We have a lot of cleaning, a lot of gardening, a lot of handyman jobs. But what's really, really interesting is that about 40% of the jobs on the platform are in categories which can't really be categorized. So they're in the something else category. We always laugh about this because we see people going, hey, I need someone to come and pretend to be my boyfriend so my parents get off my back, and think that I'm hooked up. Or we get someone say, hey, help me with a wedding proposal. I want someone to come and help me do an elaborate proposal to my wife. And yes, all of those jobs individually are kind of funny. They're not an industry. But in aggregate, that breakdown of labor is actually a huge, huge, huge segment. And if you look at something like Gumtree, as compared to traditional e-commerce businesses, you have big e-commerce businesses that sell books or sell shoes or sell these other vertical items. But actually, if you look on Gumtree, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. And actually, their largest category is the whole something else category. So on our platform, we have about 1.1 million community members, which I've been told is about 10 times the MCG, so that's pretty cool. We see about 75,000 jobs per month, and that's growing pretty rapidly. And we're seeing about $75 million a year in earnings that can be generated for our workers. So our workers have been paying out about $1.7 million a week working on the Airtasker platform. Some of the initiatives we're working on. We are working on we have released a partnership with the Good Guys. So now if you walk into a Good Guys store, they sell about 1 in 2 electrical products in Australia. You walk into their store, you want to get your home theatre set up, you want your refrigerator delivered and the old one taken away, or you want a TV wall mounted. All of that happens through Airtasker. So you'll be in the store, you'll book a task via the Airtasker kiosk. You'll pay at the store, the money's then escrowed, and you're connected via our platform to talk to that person and organize the details of the job. That's acquiring us about 7,000 new customers per month. But what it shows even more is that we're able to zoom in on some of these verticals, and using our marketplace platform and the trust and liquidity that's been created, there are a whole bunch of these vertical opportunities. So take things like tutors, take things like babysitters. All of these things require liquidity in the reputation of their users in order to become useful. We also did a partnership last year with 7 West Media and created an ad campaign around the common internet meme called Like a Boss. And I thought I'd just play that ad if it works, hopefully.
This is Airtasker. Just post a task you need help with, choose the right person for the job, and wait for the task to be done.
This is Derek. He just came around and set up my ping pong table. He also picked it up from the store. He did it for a good price. And tonight, way after Derek has left, I'm going to tell my family I did it. As far as they know, I carried it up all 5 floors, solo.
So just to clarify, that's not my mother. So I get asked that every day, like, how come you cast your mother in the thing? I'm like, that's a little bit racist, but don't worry about it. I'm not gonna ping you on that. Also, I can confirm that when we zoom in on the butt, that's a body double. So I was actually shocked as a startup person approving a budget for a TV production. They said, body double for bum shot. I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. We shouldn't be spending all this money doing that. But anyway, I think it's paid off nicely. So we did a partnership with 7 West Media, and why is this really, really important to us? Partnering with a brand like 7 West Media really allows us to build a household brand over time. And so integrating into things like house rules, integrating in things like Better Homes and Gardens actually allows us to create a context around what the Airtasker platform can do. And so we've done these kind of integrations. We're, of course, doing what they call spots and dots. So we're pushing our television commercial. And we're also doing a bunch of bespoke content. So I think some of you guys might have seen like Lyft in the US, Uber's competitor, doing things like Lyft Karaoke. We're doing things like that with all that awesome content that's on the Airtasker platform. And the amount of stories and the amount of characters that are in there is really quite amazing content. A couple of things that we're doing to move forward. So we released earlier this year our police check badge. So one of the things that's really important about Airtasker is it is an open platform. So you can join the platform, you can start winning work straight away, and there are very low barriers to becoming an Airtasker worker. But what we want to do over time is incrementally build up the reputation passport of our users. And those users are, of course, really motivated to do that because the more that they self-verify, the more revenue opportunity that they have. So we introduced an API-driven police check badge, which allows users to, of course, say that they have a clear history. We also partnered with Commonwealth Bank and did an integration into their identity system in order to be able to check IDs, which of course again adds another huge dimension of information. You can imagine how much data Commonwealth Bank has on their users. And we also introduced a thing called Airtasker Academy. And this is really, really important for us because if we think about how people are being prepared to go out and work in today's society, they are being prepared, through these really like big blocks that are going to prepare you for these big careers and these big kind of career stints at a very established firm. But actually, there's nobody who's coaching people on how to get by as a freelancer and how to join the gig economy and actually be able to monetize their time in that way. So, where are we going? Currently, we're in the consumer and SMB market mainly. But as you can see through our partnership with the Good Guys and a couple of the other partnerships that we're going to be rolling out this quarter, we're very much moving into an enterprise space. So working with large organizations who need access to huge scalable workforces. There's temporary recruitment. So once we've built up this massive book of information about people and their reputations, you can clearly see there's an opportunity to be able to use that labor and sell that to different customers. But also the one that we think is the most exciting is this one around the whole new consumer services. So we talked about the wedding proposals. We talked about the pretending to be your boyfriend and all this like crazy stuff. But actually that market is absolutely huge. We no longer need to think about labor in these forced verticals, accountant, plumber, electrician. We can now start to think of these workers as people who can solve your problem. So I need someone to do a tax return for me. Yes, you may be an accountant. You may also be a consultant. You may be someone who's just done their tax return, has the same scope as you. So I guess I'll just finish by talking about how big this opportunity is. So if you look at something like Uber, when they started in 2009, they sort of went to their VCs and they were like, how big is the market for Uber? And they were like, it's a huge market. It's $140 million in San Francisco alone. So can you imagine what would happen if we got 20% market share just in that city alone? That would be like $30 million of revenue. And people were like, oh, that's pretty impressive, but go ahead and attack that market. But 5 years later, they're sort of like looking at the numbers and it's like, Uber's revenue in San Francisco alone back then, I'm sure it's much larger now, was already 500 million. So really what's happened there is they've unlocked the potential and made it so that people can more easily access this kind of service. And by doing that, they're actually creating jobs and creating an economic shift. They call that the shadow market, and we believe that the shadow market for Airtasker is even larger. It's all of those jobs that right now are not being done. Your garage, which has boxes that need to be taken away, it's just sitting there undone. Or that business that you're not going to start because accessing labor is too hard. All of those things are going to become possible via Airtasker. So thank you very much.